For more than 2 decades, we've been educating our listeners about financial topics that are most important to you. Do you have enough money to retire? How will you keep from running out of money? What's your plan for managing market risk? What about taxes, inflation, and healthcare? Each week, we talk with an advisor at Lucia Capital Group about these issues and more. This is Managing Your Financial Future.
That it is, Managing Your Financial Future. Welcome back. Johnny Dean, your podcast host. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm always excited to talk with my good friend, Professor Rick Plum, certified financial planner professional and accredited wealth management advisor. Some of my favorite things to do, Rick, are to debunk what is out there. And sometimes when I read things and I see things that are kind of pervasive everywhere, I'd like to talk to you about it. And one of those things has to do with this whole idea of the 4% rule. You've heard of that, haven't you?
Oh, I've heard of it. I have definitely heard of it.
Yeah. Well, we haven't, we've referenced this from time to time. I know but we haven't really talked about it as a single topic for quite some time on this program. And I think it's worth coming back to because it's one of those retirement planning ideas that people hear all the time and they start to take it as a gospel truth. Now,
and that's the problem because it has some basis in definite theory and is a very useful tool, but it is not a rule that cannot be broken, or even a rule that is, it's more like a guideline.
Yeah, there you go. Exactly. And that's the word we've been using. And the funny thing is, depending on who you ask, the 4% rule is either the gold standard or it's completely outdated, or it's back, it's dead, it's too high, it's too low, or it's the thing. I don't know. I mean, but it's okay. We're going to talk about this today. You mentioned the word, and that's exactly what it is, the guideline. And that's where I'm going to start with, because the problem isn't necessarily the number, like the number 4, but the problem is treating it like it's some kind of hard and fast rule. So let's talk about this. And we're also going to get into a little bit why everyone's withdrawal rate is different and why it should not be the thing that runs your entire retirement plan. So let's start there, Rick. When people hear 4% rule, what exactly are they being told to do, and why this whole idea that it's a guideline?
Well, this all came from some studies that were done in the 90s that talked about longevity, viability of a portfolio, that if you were to take a distribution of a constant percent of the original value plus inflation over a series of years, at what rate could we basically set it at using a balanced portfolio with a systematic withdrawal? That was the old way everybody did everything. You did one big balanced portfolio and did a systematic withdrawal from it. And what they did was they looked at, every different rate, if I took a 1% distribution. So if I, using the hypothetical $1 million portfolio, I'm taking 1% of it every year, $10,000 a year out. And then how long will that last if I increase that 10,000 with inflation every year? Well, that one lasts forever and ends up with a lot of money. 2%, 3%, 4%, 5%, 6%, 7%. They just kept going up the list until they started failing, to where the money was running out. And they were using what they call Monte Carlo simulations, which took, call it, let's say, the last 100 years and just grouped them in every possible scenario together. So you could get a period of time where you've got a 2000, 2001, 2002, 2008, 2009. Those 5 years never existed in consecutive years, but in a Monte Carlo, you could. On the other hand, you could get a 96, 97, 98, 99, 2009, 10, 11, 12. You could get all these positives in a row too, which never happened in real life. But they basically looked at all these different scenarios and said that using a little bit over a 4% distribution from your original starting investment value, inflation adjusting it with CPI every year, and I don't know what CPI they use, because if you're using a different set of years for the historical, did they use the same CPI for each of the years that they used? I mean, maybe they did. But the inflation adjustment, and they said with a 4.2 or 4, call it a 4% distribution. So on $1 million, $40,000 is 4%. If you started with a $40,000 withdrawal, you would have a 96.5% chance, some number like that, of the money lasting for at least 30 years. And so that became, most people that retire at 65 are, yeah, they want to make sure they have enough money, but 95's out there, and it's still out there.
Age 95.
Age 95, 30 years, a 30-year distribution. So they felt that was a comfortable retirement standard to work from. Now, that was done back when interest rates were 6 and 7%, dividend rates were X, and different market terminology than it is today. We've been through a couple different market worlds since then. They've redid the numbers, or other people redid the numbers about 10 years ago, and they said with low bond rates, at that time interest rates were basically in the toilet, with low bond rates and all this going forward, it really should only be about a 2.8% distribution rate because of what we expect the markets to do. And then the original Dr. Benjamin that did this original came and said, no, it should be 4.7. And so there's an argument between what is the actual realistic distribution rate. The 4% has been the most common, the most prevalent distribution rate that most people think is a reasonable guideline to follow through. And it makes some sense. I mean, now, does that mean that everybody, and that's for somebody who's looking for a 30-year distribution?
Mm-hmm.
What if you're already 75? You're trying to make your money last to 105? What if you're 55 and you want to retire?
Mm-hmm.
Does that mean you're setting yourself to run out of money at 85? 95 is still outside, life expectancy. 85 is kind of right in the normal life expectancy. And 85, at 65, most people at least have access to Social Security, where at 55, you don't have any access to Social Security. It's coming in later. And so how do we account for those kinds of things? Most pensions don't start quite that early, although some do, but they're reduced. And so what works, and what works every single time? And the answer is no stated rate. There is no one single rate that you can say works every single time for every single person with every single risk difference and tolerance that we have in every single market. And so you have to tailor it to the individual. But like I said before, it is a great tool for getting an idea, a guideline of, so you can make assumptions about what we could potentially take as a retirement. It doesn't necessarily mean that you can't take more than 4.5% in the first year of retirement.
Mm-hmm.
It all depends on what's going on with your life, how things are going, and everybody's different. And everybody's got a different age too.
It's useful in the sense that, okay, if you use it as a guideline, a 4%, roughly 4% withdrawal rate, it makes it clear that something like a 9 or a 10% withdrawal rate,
that's unsustainable.
It's unsustainable, certainly, over a 30-year time period, and probably over a 15-year time period. But it gives you, I guess, an idea of where you are. Now, a 6% withdrawal rate could potentially work, Rick, but it's kind of depends on other factors.
6% withdrawal rate can work, and probably will work more than half of the time that it can be done. It's just that about half the time, or maybe a little less, it's not going to work. And if you're Murphy's Law, that's a hard way to learn that. And by the time you learn it's not going to work, it's too late. And the problem is that 6%, even the 4%, anytime you're using a systematic withdrawal system, any problems in the first 5, 6, 7, 8 years of retirement, the negative sequence of returns happening early, you run the risk of having an issue down the line. And so we have to, if you can do a strategy that gets away from the negative risk, you can do a little bit different payouts. You can do a little bit higher payouts because you can get past the problems of, one of the problems with any systematic withdrawal system is that if you have negative years, if I need $40,000, okay, that's fine. I take out my I spend $40,000. But if that's out of $1 million, but what if I have a 10% hit? What if I have a 16% hit in my portfolio? Yeah. Just for easy math here. I took 4 out and I lost 16%. So my million is now only $800,000. Now, by definition, that's a 5% withdrawal. Because now I need $40,000 plus inflation from $800,000. But to get $40,000, I have to spend more money. I have to sell more assets. I have to sell more shares of what used to be more valuable to get the same income that I had before. And it becomes a never-ending downwards potential spiral. And so we have to be wary of how we're taking money out of the portfolio, but it can be used from a high-level planning concept, especially if you're not at retirement yet. And you can say, okay, if my 401k is X today, I'm putting in the max, or I'm putting in X amount of dollars per year. I'm going to do this for another 10 years. And so I can project my portfolio out that by the time I retire, my portfolio should be about X amount of dollars, Y amount of dollars. That will provide income. If we just say by then it's going to be worth $1.5 million. Okay, that's going to support on a 4% distribution $60,000 a year, $60,000 a year. Plus my Social Security is projected to be $40,000 a year. My spouse's Social Security is projected to be another $30,000 a year. So between all these different sources, I'm getting 30, 40, and 60. I'm getting $130,000 a year. Maybe bring that back down a little bit because of inflation. That means my projected retirement would be looking like $100,000 a year. Is that an acceptable retirement to me? No. Well, then you better do something about it. And the only thing you can do about it is work longer or save more or be more aggressive and hope for the best over the next 10 years. So one of those things has to go. But it's a way to get a general idea of where I'll be in the future. It doesn't mean that when you get out to retirement that you automatically take your Social Security at that time and only take 4% with them from the distribution. Maybe you say, I'm really healthy, I'm going to live a long time. I'm going to defer to my Social Security until 70, which means I'm going to take more from my portfolio. So there's a lot of factors involved in how to actually do this. But from an overview, a high level, planning forward point of view, it can work. And this also assumes you're retiring around 65. If you're not retiring until 70, 75, well, the 4%'s probably too low. Take out more.
Well, it could be. And let me tell you, you brought this up too. They talk about the classic 4%, and then you take a bump up for inflation. But this rule, such as it is, assumes that spending is going to rise every year. But real retirement really, it often doesn't work that way. I mean, people's spending does not tend to do that. So there's still a problem with this whole idea of
right. And so you
4%.
Get this geometric progression on your spending. So when you start at $40,000, if inflation were a flat 3%, well, don't know what it's going to be, then by the time you're 95 years old, you're spending $97,000 a year. That's what it takes to have the same purchasing power as $40,000 did 30 years prior at 3%. And it's like most of the people that we see, the early years of retirement have inflation. And it's more of spending inflation rather than actual inflation. It's like, well, I really enjoyed that one cruise last year. I'm going to take 2 this year. That's the cost of the cruise didn't get significantly more. You just did more of it.
Well, that's a good thing. This is where we talk about spending more early in retirement, and then the spending kind of abates a little bit until you get to the health care potentially.
Once you get older, once you get into your 70s and beyond, instead of taking 2, 3, 4 cruises a year, you're cutting back on the number of cruises. What I have noticed the most is the food budget for people. Not for me, unfortunately.
One
you
day,
saw me, you'd say,
maybe.
yeah, he hasn't cut back. But they don't spend as much on food. When they go out, they don't order as much. They just can't eat as much. I mean, I hear that quite often. I just can't eat like I used to eat. I just can't do it. And so I've got that to look forward to in my older ages when I can't eat as much. That's my diet process right now.
What does all this say though about the idea of the 4% rule? I mean,
you don't
obviously
need to spend as much in the future, so you can spend a little bit more, so you can have a little higher distribution rate today, maybe, and then cut back on it later, because you're probably going to cut back just in general terms, just because you won't need as much inflation when you're 80, 85, 90.
Well, and then we also touched on this with regard to the 4%, the problems of the 4% rule. It also goes hand in hand with your own withdrawal strategy. I know you just addressed this a few minutes ago, so we don't need to go over it again. But I guess, as you said, they're assuming what's called a systematic withdrawal, can you just explain that for people who don't know what you're saying when you just, very quickly?
Well, systematic withdrawal assumes that you use one portfolio, one basic allocation, and it's a balanced allocation, stocks and bonds. 60-40, 40-60, 50-50, somewhere in that range, bonds and stocks. And it's rebalanced every year. So you always maintain the same percentage of stock and bond ownership going forward. And so unfortunately, when things don't work out as you want them to, when we have negative years, 2022, 2018, 2008, 9, pick the negative year. The market is down and you're selling assets. The assets may have had a net asset value, a unit value, shall we call it, of $10 a share, and you were selling, 4,000 of those units to get your 40,000. Well, now it's got a unit value of $8 a share, and you've got to sell 5,000 units to get the same $40,000 of cash flow that you want. So those extra 1,000 shares are gone, and they never can recover. And so you've spent them. And so systematic withdrawal is basically spending from the portfolio, and the portfolio has a certain inherent volatility to it. It's being tempered because parts of it are less volatile than other parts of it, but it's not taking the volatility out of all of it. And we know that even if it's a 50, let's call it 50-50, if bonds are earning 4% and you've got 50% of your money in bonds, that means that 2% is coming from the bonds. And the other 2% that you're going to spend has got to come from the stocks, the dividends, and other things. Well, if the market's down, where's that money going to come from? It's got to come from selling assets when they're down. And we don't want to sell assets when they're down ever.
Well, and what that means is that the 4% becomes a danger.
It can.
When you're using the wrong withdrawal strategy. Well,
and sometimes it can work really well if the markets go up and up and up and up and up. And that's where people get, unfortunately, they look at the historical returns of a portfolio and they see that this balance fund has had a 5, 10, 15, 20, 25-year average of 7, 8, 9%. And they say, and this has been written, and it was recently a very, very prominent anti-debt guy made this comment recently that, look at this, it averages 10%. You take your 5 or 6% out to spend, you still got 5% in there for inflation. But it doesn't do it every year.
Yeah.
And the years where you don't earn a positive return or don't earn as much as you're withdrawing, your portfolio is getting smaller. And so when it's getting smaller, you're taking more out as a percentage. That can have an impact. So you need to avoid selling when it's down. How do you make money in the market? You buy low and sell high.
Which can go against human nature. Well, so we've talked now so far about the problems with the idea of using it as a rule, a strict rule. There are all kinds of problems. But you said it's a useful tool, and it can be a helpful tool. You gave a few examples. But when you're talking with somebody across the desk or whatever, how do you use this 4% guideline? How do you walk somebody through that?
Well, we can start it from an overall high view, and then let's talk about how the best way to create a strategic plan to give you that 4. Now, first off, can you live on 4% plus inflation and pensions? Is that distribution? Let's find out what you need and say, okay, well, Rick, I need more from my portfolio to cover the shortfall than 4%. I need 6 or 8%. Okay. Is there going to be anything that changes in your life in the next 5, 10, 15 years? Well, I get a pension that starts, or I'm going to delay taking Social Security until 70, and then I can take less money. Or my mortgage will be paid off 8 years from now, and that means I can take less money. So having a little bit, so we have to model in what is happening with the incomes that you have now, the needs that you have now, and are either one of those going to change in the future other than cost of living? And we build that in too if we have to. But it's just a matter of identifying it. And the reality is, if somebody is taking a 6, 7, 8% distribution, well, if they're 95, I'm not that worried. But if they're 55, am I that worried? If they're taking a 7% distribution right now, but when they start their Social Security, it'll drop significantly? It depends. Depends on what, if it just depends on how the math works out. We have to model it out a little bit. So I'm not going to hold to a strict 4%, but I'm going to look at it in just the early stages of talking to somebody before they've told us everything that's going on, other than I need 10,000 a month. My Social Security is going to be 4,000 a month, so therefore I need 6 from my portfolio, 72,000 a year. Well, if you've only got $1 million and you need to start doing this now, what's going to change in the future? Because the 7.2% distribution can work for a while. But, oh yeah, by the way, Rick, we want to leave a big legacy for our kids. Okay, we've got some very competing issues here. Something's got to give. Now, a 7.2 distribution doesn't scare me right off the bat, but I want to hear some other things. Do you have a house? Well, yeah, we live in Southern California. Our house is worth $1.4 million. Is it paid for? No, not yet, but it's only got, like I said, 8 years left. So by the time they start running out of money, well after 8 years from now with a 7.2% distribution, they have an ace in the hole. They may not like it, but they can always do a reverse mortgage, and they can take out quite a bit of money. So what else do we have going on? I was speaking with somebody the other day that they want to retire, and they've got about a 7 or 8% potential distribution they want to take. But in looking at their overall family, the guy's mom is like 92 years old and worth, I think she's got about 42 different rental properties. And so they're going to inherit all these rental properties, or the value of, and there's only 2 kids, and so they're going to get half. And even if mom has medical issues and such, she's not going to spend it all. So they will get something. So they don't need to provide 30 years worth of cash flow. I mean, mom's 92. I mean, do I need 10 more years worth of cash flow, 15 years worth of cash flow for this family to retire? And then they're going to get flush, and a 7.2 distribution will definitely handle that. So it's all about what is realistic for this individual and what's happening in their life. On the other hand, we've talked about this call many, many times that we took 20 years ago on the air. The guy was retired. He's already taken his Social Security. He has $300,000 and he needs 30+ thousand a year for the rest of his life. And he was like 62 years old. And he's already taken his Social Security. Everything there was no changes coming up, nothing positive happening, no inheritances. Maybe he plays the lottery, I don't know, but that was his only saving grace, because taking a 10% distribution starting at 62 with no future changes other than inflation going against you, that is not the best recipe unless you are not a healthy individual. I mean, that's a 72, that's about a 12, 13-year time horizon. Yeah. Realistically, could be shorter. The problem is the more aggressive you try to be to get the better rate of return, meaning more stock oriented, the more likely that you're going to have a bad year, which means you're going to run out even quicker.
Which goes against the whole matching your assets to your liabilities. Yeah, that is a big problem. Well, that was very well explained. And the funny thing is, people generally, as a rule, as we just said, need more income, would like more income early in the retirement process. But, of course...
But we're afraid to do it because we're afraid of running out of money.
Yeah, and it's a paradox that has solutions, potentially. You made a good point that if something's changed, if you need right now a 6-7% rate of withdrawal, but it's only going to be for the next 5 years, 6 years, because you got some kind of something happening.
Even 10 years.
Even 10 years, I guess. Then it's not so bad. But once you decide that there are no changes coming, then you've got big problems.
But then we have to kind of reevaluate what's going on, because, if it's almost a for sure thing that you're going to run out of money by the time you're 75, what are you going to do? Are you going to say, I'll deal with it then and live on Social Security only at that point? That's a fairly abrupt change of lifestyle. Or, do you get a part-time job? You don't have to necessarily make the big bucks. You just have to cover some of the need to bring that distribution down a little bit, and do something you enjoy. You don't have to make the big bucks. Now, but having an outside job isn't the worst thing in the world if you can do it.
And this points out the other problem too. If you are taking 7 or 8% the first few years, but you're using a systematic withdrawal method, even if you have something coming down the pike 8, 9, 10 years from now, Rick, if I'm taking that 7%, but I've got the first 3 years or 2 years, whatever, really bad rates of return, I mean, it may not matter that I've got something coming in 10 years, right?
Well, I'm not saying that you don't pay attention to the appropriate strategy for
Right.
creating the cash flow. Regardless of what your withdrawal rate is, unless it's 0 or 1, you need the appropriate strategy to make sure that you don't screw yourself up. And even if you have only a 2% withdrawal rate, you still probably want to do it the right way. But obviously, the higher your distribution rate is, the more important that strategy is. Because, yes, if you got a better rate of return, it could extend your payout from 13 years to 14 years, maybe 15 years. But if you have a bad series of events happen in the market because you're being more aggressive, it could turn it into an 8-year distribution. It could really shorten it by quite a bit.
Well, and this is why it's not just about the whole idea of 4%, but it goes hand in hand with strategy. You cannot take one, you cannot take the number and just have it apply in a vacuum.
Well, and that's also why it's not a rule, because it's a guideline, and it should be used only as a guideline. But yet, even at the 4% rule, you could stretch their longevity to a better longevity by applying the right strategy to it to begin with.
Well, you have to do it. The two are actually locked together. If you really wanted to do this correctly, you have to understand that strategy and withdrawal rates go hand in hand. I just don't see how you could separate the two, yet so many people do.
Right. And that's why I said it's useful for future planning. It's useful for high-level planning as an overview, but not when you get into the nitty-gritty. And one of the reasons it's only useful is because they did it wrong to begin with using a systematic withdrawal.
People don't focus on the percentage as much as they – I'm sorry, they don't focus they don't focus on the percentage as much as they do on the numbers. They have $1 million, say, okay, well, I need 40 grand. That happens to be 4%. Well, the next year, even if the portfolio drops, I still need the 40 grand. What they're not thinking about is that 4% now becomes 6% or whatever the number is. So
some of the advisors out there say, well, just always do 4%. Which means that your income is unknown from year to year. Yeah. If I have a really good year, I can spend more money. But if I have a really bad year, I have to cut back. It's really hard to cut back. I'm sorry. That sucks. And if I'm thinking, I've got a budget of this, X this year, and I'm thinking, I can go see the grandkids, I can go on a cruise, I can go visit a national park, I could do this. And then all of a sudden, the market's down next year, and instead of having the budget I had this year, I have to cut back on my budget by 10, 15, 20%. What am I cutting back? I didn't want that. Letting the market, I've said this many times, letting the market dictate what your budget's going to be on a year-to-year basis is stupid. That's just asking for trouble. It just adds anxiety that doesn't need to be there. It adds complexity that doesn't need to be there. It takes away from your ability to enjoy the retirement that you worked so long. Remember how many years you worked? How long you toiled and struggled and saved and put together this portfolio to then not have the ability to do what you want to do when you want to do it? That's kind of the definition of sucks.
It goes back to we talked about that before. I think we called it the RMD method, where if you only take 4% of what's left, well, you're probably not ever going to run out of money when you think about it.
With an RMD method, which means that you look up your life expectancy and you take your portfolio and divide it by your life expectancy, and that's the amount of money you can take out every year. By the definition of life expectancy, you're never going to run out of money, because even at 115, you have a 1-year life expectancy or something. So you got a little bit of time left. So at no case does it take 100% of the money out. But that's just no way to live your life. If you have no control over when you can spend your own money, now you want to be able to do what you want to do when you want to do it. Now, it doesn't mean you'll be able to do everything you want to do next year, because you know what your budget is next year. You can't say, well, I really enjoyed going on my cruises. I want to go on 15 of them next year instead of 1. So I want to take my budget from $40,000 to $140,000. Okay, that is not a realistic issue. But, going from 40 to 30 is not a realistic way to manage your retirement either.
No, it's there's the emotionally human aspect of this. So the rule, what a guideline, it's not useless, but that's not the point. But as Rick said, it's part of a starting point. It can give you a rough idea where you can look at down the road and say, okay, am I close? Is it might this work?
If it works on the guide, the concepts? Now let's get into the right way to create the strategy. It's like, I want to drive from here to New York. Google says it takes 45 hours. Okay, how do I want to do this? And do I need to take a little longer because on the way I want to stop at this place and that place, or do I just want to get from point A to point B? What's the fastest way? But overall, okay, it's 3,000 miles. I can average X amount. I can do the math. Okay, it's going to take this many hours. Okay, now let's look at we can't, it's January and there's a big storm coming. Mm-hmm. I can't make it that fast. Okay, we have to adjust, but basically, we've got a good starting point. Let's see how it actually works in the real world, doing it the right way.
And don't try these metaphors at home, folks. Rick Plum is a professional.
We could do what they call it, not the Cannonball Run. What's that cross-country race called? I mean, somebody during COVID did that cross-country race in like a day or less than a day. So
you
is
would
that
know,
the standard
not
I
me.
should set it up now? It's like, just because they could do it doesn't mean I can do it? No.
I don't know. But see, this is why we keep coming back to strategy. If you're just pulling money from a balanced portfolio every year and just hoping everything falls into place because that's what your strategy requires, well, yeah, then this can be a problem. But this is why we talk about the bucket strategy as well. I thought I'd slip that in. Use the 4% rule as a guideline. Use it as a check, but don't live your retirement by a rule of thumb that doesn't know anything about you. If you like to talk through what a retirement income strategy might look like in the way that Professor Plum just described it, based on your own situation, you can call the professor or any of the Lucia Capital Group advisors at their phone number, which is thusly 800-644-1150. 800-644-1150. Got a whole team of advisors that do this stuff. Rick Plum is the Chief Financial Planning Officer, so he oversees all these things. But these folks know how this works, and they all work together. You can also go online, visit the website, luciacap.com, LUCIACAP.com. While you're there, download all of our guides. These are very popular. Bucket Strategy Guide is just one of them. Type it into the search bar and you'll see it's the first thing that comes up. Download it for free. Social Security, other ones, rollovers, retirement income, all that stuff. So make sure you do that. Make sure you subscribe as well to the podcast, Managing Your Financial Future, Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Most of you listening have done that. If you have not done it, do it. You don't want to miss any future episodes. We are out of time. I appreciate you listening. For Professor Rick Plum, Certified Financial Planner Professional and Accredited Wealth Management Advisor, I am your podcast host, Johnny Dean. Thanks so much for listening. We will talk with you all again next week. The information provided should not be considered specific tax, legal, or investment advice and is not specific to any individual's personal circumstances. Each taxpayer should seek independent advice from a tax professional based on his or her individual circumstances. These materials are provided for general information and educational purposes based upon publicly available information from sources believed to be reliable. The information in these materials may change at any time and without notice, and its accuracy cannot be guaranteed. There is no guarantee that any investment strategy will meet its stated objective. All investments involve risk, including potential loss of principal. Examples cited are hypothetical, are for illustrative purposes only, are not guaranteed, and subject to potential federal and state law amendments. There is no guarantee that you will achieve the results discussed or illustrated. An asset allocation strategy does not ensure a profit or protect against loss. Bonds are subject to market and interest rate risk. If sold prior to maturity, bond values will decline as interest rates rise. Bonds are subject to availability, change in price, call features, and credit risk. Stock investing includes risks including fluctuating prices and loss of principal. Before investing, carefully consider a mutual fund's investment objectives, risk, charges, and expenses. To obtain a prospectus or summary prospectus which contains this and other information, call your financial advisor. Read the prospectus carefully before investing. 401k benefits may be subject to change at your employer, the governing pension, or benefit organization's discretion. The information provided is based on current laws which are subject to change at any time. Lucia Capital Group is not affiliated with or endorsed by the Social Security Administration or any government agency. Social Security rules can be complex. For more information about Social Security benefits, visit the SSA website at ssa.gov or call 800-772-1213 to speak with an SSA representative. Rick Plum is a registered representative with, and securities and advisory services offered through LPL Financial, a registered investment advisor and member FINRA SIPC.